Hey everyone, happy Saturday. This work week I actually got a chance to read 3 books. 2 you can see in the thumbnail. The first book that I started was Bridge Across Forever. I intended to read this for my summer ween reading vlog and readathon, but I just got super swamped and I was very ambitious for the readathon. So basically, Bridge Across Forever is about a young lady named Ellen Cole, and she decides to visit Wales one day, which is where her ancestors originated from, leaving behind her designer boyfriend. He's kind of like this rich guy who also happens to have the same last name as her, and possibly similar ancestors, to visit Wales and to learn about her ancestors. So she arrives one day in this little town in Wales, and she's immediately drawn to this river and this bridge, and she crosses this bridge and she sees this horrific evil looking face in the river below. And she walks away and she was like, wow, that was strange. Did I hallucinate that? Am I crazy? Like, was that even real? She was just trying to figure it out, basically. And she happens to follow this butterfly to this beautiful garden off to the side of this bridge. And there's a man working in the garden, and he tells her that there's a little cottage that she could rent from the older lady who owns the property. So she went ahead and decided to book the little cottage for a month, her entire stay. And she ends up finding out that the man who was working in the garden is also staying there in the cottage. And she was like, why didn't the little lady tell me basically that I would be basically renting a room and sharing it with another man? Well, it's very interesting the way this story turns out. It's somewhat predictable. There is a lot of supernatural elements. There's a curse involved, and you get to find out more about her ancestors and his ancestors, and it's just an all-over interesting story. The ending was a little bit hokey and cheesy and kind of predictable, so that's why I gave it a 3, but I'm really enjoying all these Silhouette Shadows books. The next book that I went ahead and read was If It Bleeds by Stephen King, and I actually listened to that on Audible. If It Bleeds is an anthology book, and basically it has 4 short stories. The first story is about a boy who is working for this older man and basically reading him stories, and kind of like a companion for him. One day the old man dies, and he happens to leave an iPhone in his pocket, and he starts calling this older friend after he's already been buried and passed away, and strange things happen. I really like that story. I thought it was spooky and eerie, and overall like a satisfying read. The second story was a little less satisfying for me, but still very well written. I loved hearing all of the little ideas that were put forth in that story about life, and how life is basically the universe, and how one life affects everything. And that's what I got from it, but it was also very strange and different in a sort of way to tell that idea. The third story in the anthology was my absolute favorite, and that's because I love Holly. This is my the second time hearing about this character. She was in The Outsider, which I absolutely loved. I thought it was a really scary story, just terrifying, the ideas behind it. And It's kind of like a sort of continuation of The Outsider in a way. And it's more of a Holly-centered book, and I thought she was a really unique character, so I was glad to see her carry this book. Also, I listened to the author's note, and she is in Mr. Mercedes as well, which I haven't read, so I intend to pick that up pretty soon just to see more of her story. And the fourth story in the book touched a little close to home because I'll tell you right now. There is this man who is a writer, and he wants to go up into his cabin, kind of in the outskirts of a small town, away from everything, basically, so that he can write and focus on his book. But he is in danger of being hurt and seriously ill because there's a huge storm coming, and he happens to realize that he's getting this really bad illness because someone else who he happened to meet shook his hand, and the illness transferred, and that man happened to be he happened to have pneumonia, so he was really bad off, which is kind of like what we're all sort of like afraid of right now. Well, some of us are afraid of it, I guess. But I don't want to get sick. And with everything that's going on, it kind of like touched kind of close to home, shaking someone's hand and then getting ill. And then something strange happens to him in the midst of being ill. He happens to meet this rat. And I'm just going to go on and say that it's kind of one of those cautionary tales of be careful what you wish for and the monkey's paw. But I love retellings of the monkey's paw, so I loved all of the ideas that came off of that, and I loved the rat aspect of it. I thought it was fantastic, and yeah, great story, great set of stories together, and as an anthology, I thought it was pretty strong. I gave it a 4-star. So the third book that I listened to on Audible was The Demon Next Door. I believe that's what it was called. And it was about a man who realized that someone that grew up in his town, his small little town, happened to be a monster, and basically told the story of how he kind of fell through the cracks of society and kind of got away with being labeled as a monster for a very long time. So Danny Corwin is the man that this story is about, and his victims. And basically he is a serial killer, serial rapist, and he did a lot of horrific things, but because of his age and his victim's age to begin with, people weren't quite so aware of what a monster he was, and they kind of were able to wash over the horrific things that he did because it wasn't so public, all of the awful things that he did. And because he was a minor, he basically, he was found out, and he basically, it felt like a slap on the wrist. Even though he did serve time, it just didn't feel like the time fit the crime. And even though he was young, it still was such a vicious thing to do to someone. And they were trying to get him like mental help, but I think what happened was his family didn't quite realize how awful his thoughts were, and the doctors just kind of like checked off the list, checked off all the boxes on the list, and basically kept him in the same in the same mindset. So they kept him in the same mindset is what I'm trying to say. And they didn't really worry about the red flags that were popping up in his sessions. So he goes on to commit more horrific things and get away with quite a few murders and assaults and all kinds of awful things. So it was a hard read, but it was more of like, this is what happened. And this is how a town sort of protected a killer and a horrific person. His family was a really well-to-do family. They basically were very religious. So, and he loved his family because it's so strange to think that that's how he turned out, because his family was very involved in his life, according to this book. And he always wanted to please his parents, and he really wanted to be with his parents too. So he heavily relied on them. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. Next week, I'm hoping to read quite a few more books. I already have started, and I'm really loving this book journey that I'm going on. It's really been fun to sit down and give myself time to read and find the love of reading physical books again, and escaping into those book worlds. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.